Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Smile. Today's guest is Tom Cronin. Tom is an international keynote speaker, author, and leadership trainer specializing in peak performance, resilience, burnout prevention, and mental well-being. With over 26 years in high-pressure global financial markets as one of Australia's leading bond and swap brokers, Tom brings rare credibility to conversations about performance under pressure. He has delivered keynotes and corporate trainings for organizations including Amazon, Boston Consulting Group, Oracle, Harvard Business School, Qantas, UBS, and Coca-Cola, and has spoken at major conferences and events across Australia, the USA, Europe, and Asia. Tom is the author of 6 books and the producer of the feature-length documentary The Portal, and is widely recognized for bridging the worlds of elite performance, leadership, and mindfulness in a way that resonates with modern organizations. Wow. Tom, welcome to Behind the Smile. How are you today?
Really well, thanks. So good to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
I'm so excited about this conversation today. We have a mutual friend, the beautiful Jess, who brought our worlds together. And then in the brief conversations we've had back and forth, I just thought, how have I not had you on sooner?
Well, it's just in the right time, I think. I'm looking forward to this.
Always divine timing. So, Tom, we're going to kick it off with some nice, easy questions to begin. Could you please share with our audience, where do you live? What does an average day look like? And what do you do for fun?
Such a good question. I live in Sydney, on the east coast of Sydney, and my days quite early starts usually. I like to get up and go straight to the gym. So I go to the gym 3, 4, 5 times a week. The days that I'm not at the gym, I'll do my morning routine, including my meditation and some breath work and some stretching. But I do generally like to get out the door pretty quickly, go to the gym, and then come back and then do my morning session of meditation after that. And then from there, I get stuck into my work, which will be either content for my business, or it will be coaching calls or some podcast interviews like we're doing today, some admin. And then amongst that, I'll be walking my dog because he needs to get his walks in every day. And then I've got family time, so I spend a lot of time with family, particularly towards the evening as well. I love cooking. I love meditating. I love going to the gym. I love saunas, ice baths, anything kind of healthy and in that sort of peak performance stuff, I really, really enjoy.
Okay, I have to ask Tom, what dog do you have?
Of course, I live in Sydney, so I've got a cavoodle. I mean, what else is there? No, cavoodles or sausage dogs, right?
Yeah, so cute. My dog, Frank, was actually born in Sydney, but then when I moved back to Melbourne in 2021, he came with me. So he's technically a Sydney-sider as well. But, oh my God, so cute. And what's your cavoodle's name?
Marlo.
Oh, I can just picture it. That's so gorgeous.
Yeah, he's very much part of the family. I would say he's like, I've got 2 children, and I would say he's like a 3rd child now.
Yeah, I get that. As a child-free woman, my dog is my baby, and I am not ashamed of it. I actually just got this hat, which my husband was like, he just rolled his eyes and laughed at me in a loving way. I got this hat made and it's got Frank's face like embroidered on it. And underneath it says Frank's mum. Yeah, that's the level that we're at over here. So yes, anything to do with dogs, I'm here for it.
I guess a big question before we move on there is, where does your dog sit at dinner time?
Ooh.
Because sometimes our dog wants to have a chair at the table, which is something, please don't tell anyone this, but it's a bit of a concern. But it really literally wants to sit at a chair at the table.
I've got to tell you, a few people are listening, so they might have found out. It's really interesting. Not Tom. There I go. Frank only likes to sit at the dinner table if other people are there. It's really interesting. If it's just Damo and I, he does his own thing. Anyway, we'll park the dog chat because we could be here all day. Hey, Tom, I've asked you to bring in a photo today. Now, this is a photo from a time in your life where you were hiding behind a smile. So you were presenting one version of yourself externally, but internally it was a very different story. Could you please describe for our listeners the photo that you've brought along today? I'm bringing it up on the screen right now. What are we looking at here, and what was really going on for you at that time in your life?
On the outside, I was looking like an incredibly successful person. I was living in a beautiful big home. I was making lots of money. I was a broker on a trading room floor. I was wearing pinstripe suits. I had fancy cars. I lived in the affluent suburbs of Sydney. I, was seemingly healthy because, I worked out and I would, surfed and would be up early going to the beach and lived in Bondi and, had wonderful family around me. And so everything looks good, right? And no one would even know. And most people, in fact, pretty much no one knew what was going on the inside. It was something that I kept very, very private to myself, that I would experience incredible levels of anxiety, panic attacks, chronic insomnia, really bad insomnia. This morphed and continued to evolve into depression. And this was all fueled by using a lot of drugs, drinking, and then with that came a lot of guilt and shame. It was just a horrible cocktail mix of bad things. And it was all happening quietly on the inside and no one really knew about it. I was very good at conveying a very successful man on the outside, but that wasn't the case on the inside.
Talk to me about the shame. What was it about that caused you to feel this deep sense of shame?
Well, firstly, I'm a Catholic. Well, I was Catholic. So that's just inherent within us all. We programmed that into us, particularly going to an all-boys Catholic school. Just whole sense of right and wrong, and that these are bad things, drinking, drugs, all the other stuff that goes with that sort of world. What I think it was that inherently we know what our North Star is in life. In Sanskrit, it's called Dhruva. Dhruva is actually the word given to the North Star in the night sky that doesn't move. And it's the one that the sailors and the navigators use, the shepherds use as their sort of guidance system. And this Dhruva is this inherent knowingness about the trajectory of our life that is the pathway that is the righteous, the virtuous, and the good pathway. And, I had a very strong sense of that in my life. But weirdly, I just was always constantly being thrown off that North Star pathway. And there was an inherent sort of sense of, not inherent, but there's a building and growing sense of shame and guilt about the way I was living this sort of very private, secret life that I was living.
And in regards to the mental health challenges, specifically the anxiety, the panic attacks, and the depression, did you feel the same shame about that, or a sense of perhaps a moral failing, or what's wrong with me? I shouldn't be feeling this way. How did you navigate that?
Yeah, look, I kept that very, very private. Not even my partner knew the extent of what I was going through. And again, because, you want to have your shit together, right? You're a guy, you're an alpha male, you're on a trading room floor. You need to be one of the boys. And yeah, it was something I really grappled with, how debilitating and how much I struggled with all of that. And it just got worse and worse as time went on.
So can you help me piece together how Tom ended up on the trading room floor? Because it's quite a unique path to take. And I think that I would imagine that as a child, some things probably occurred that created this drive for success and to want to step into such a high pressure environment. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about what you were like as a child and any of the experiences that you had at that time that may have influenced that path?
Yeah, it's those two worlds were so incongruent. The world that I was believing myself to be walking along the pathway, and then the world that I ended up in. So I grew up on a farm in a beautiful, like I said, Catholic upbringing, a very wholesome environment, 5 children and 4 siblings, mum and dad, and really beautiful, wholesome upbringing. I love my childhood. And we would go to church every week. We would say grace before dinner every night. We'd do rosary and all sorts of things. And so it was this sort of deeply sort of religious and wholesome sort of upbringing. And when I finished school, I was very good at writing, and I did a lot of subjects that were supportive of writing. And so I had qualified to get a degree at Macquarie University to do journalism, and I was going to write articles for Time magazine against capitalistic greed. I was very socially minded pre getting into finance. And even after school, I took a gap year of traveling around the world. And in that time, I was reading books by Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus about French existentialism and really deep philosophical books, and listening to Susie and the Banshees and the Smiths. And I was a really deep thinker and really politically minded about, the wrong things that are in the world and how I could do something to change all of that. And then I had some time to fill in before I went to university, and I'd blown a lot of my money backpacking and traveling overseas. So I just applied to a whole bunch of jobs in the paper this was late 80s, and it was the same year I landed my job that Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, landed his job. And I was 19, he was 22. It was 1987. And I was literally going to turn up to that job. I got a job, I got a really big salary, and I was going to leave within 3 months when university started. I didn't tell him that. I was like, I'm going to take the job, get some money. It was really good pay. And then it was time to enroll in uni, and I was going to go to uni. And then at the end of those 3 months, they gave me a massive pay rise and a big bonus and said, you're one of our star performers. And really, surprisingly, I was really good at the job. And so every year I thought, okay, I'll put it off for one more year and I'll go next year. And at the end of every year, they gave me a massive pay rise and a massive bonus and all these perks like sports cars and corporate Amex cards. And yeah, I just kept putting it off year after year. And 26 years later, I eventually left.
Wow, 26 years later.
Yeah.
As you were talking about that, it reminded me of, and we'll talk in more detail about the feature film that you produced, The Portal, but there was a woman in that film that talks about a similar experience in the corporate world of jumping through the hoops. And it's almost how this corporate machine gamifies our careers and essentially our lives. It's like, then we reach the next goal, then we reach the next goal. But of course, we're forever moving the bar, and that sense of satisfaction and fulfillment is never enough. And you just end up trapped on this loop, right?
Yeah, it's a merry-go-round you can't get off. We call it the Golden Handcuffs, because what happens is you set your lifestyle up to that new level of wealth that you're achieving through that organization. So if your salary gets to multiple hundreds of thousands, then you just create a lifestyle around that now you become not just enslaved to that lifestyle, but addicted to the lifestyle as well. And it's very hard for people to pull out of that once they're on that merry-go-round. And that's ultimately what happened to me as well. Even after I learned to become a meditation teacher, it was very hard to leave. It took me quite a few years before I eventually found a way to unravel myself out of that. I guess the chains that I was chained to.
And so tell me, being a good Catholic boy, I imagine that drugs and alcohol...
Let's just say Catholic boy.
Let's just say being a Catholic boy. Yeah, I imagine, and perhaps correct me if I'm wrong, that drugs and alcohol didn't feature much in your teenage years. Tell me, when did all of that sort of come into your realm, and how quickly did it take hold?
Yeah, it was definitely a big part of the culture in the finance industry. I never really was a big drinker. And drugs I'd never come across at all. Had never entered into my life at all once. When I was pre-markets, and then once I got to the markets, it was just a way of being. Some of the stuff that went on, you'd be accessing your drugs at work sometimes. So, yeah, it was pretty crazy. And that's when, it's a slippery slope there, because it's such a big part of the culture. You're young, you've got lots of money. The whole industry is built around that. And not only was it just in the industry, but I also, with another group of friends, became a big part of the rave culture. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, we used to call it the Summer of Love, which happened in sort of 89. As when the rave scene was just really exploding into remote places in paddocks through the night, 2 hours outside of Sydney, or into big warehouse parties in Sydney. And it was just such an exciting time of community and music and togetherness. But obviously that was really mixed in with a lot of drugs and late night. So there was a sort of a double whammy effect of midweek doing a lot of the drugs and drinking with the corporate sector. And that would be every single night, pretty much, would be out with traders and the industry. And then on the weekends, when a lot of people were just chilling out from that industry, I was out with a whole different group of people doing, 2-day benders on weekends, and then heading back to work on a Monday. And it just over time, my nervous system just couldn't handle that level of overwhelm.
And so do you think, looking back, it was the behavior around the drinking and the drugs that then created the dysregulation of your nervous system, the mental health, anxiety, depression? Or do you think that was going to happen either way?
No, it's definitely not something that's going to happen either way. That's a response to your nervous system based upon the demands you're putting on it. And this is like any vehicle this is all our body is. It's a vehicle that moves us from A to B. And if you have a car that moves you from A to B and you're in first gear traveling at 120 kilometers an hour all day, every day, and not giving it the right fuel, not the right oil, or not the right juice for the radiator, then eventually that thing's just going to blow up. And so for me, not putting the right fuel into the body and then treating the body with such disrespect as far as extremely late nights, obviously you think about a rave, that it's level of stimulation for the nervous system, then working all day on a trading room floor, yelling and screaming, that level of adrenaline and cortisol 24/7, 7 days a week after week, month after month, year after year, the system will blow up. It reaches what's called in engineering terms a bifurcation point where the system starts to break down.
And so when did that occur for you? And was that in alignment with, say, a rock bottom moment?
It was definitely the rock bottom. It was it was a breakdown or breakthrough. So it was one of those moments where at the age of 29, so I'd been in the industry for 10 years at that point, and it was one of those times when I was having suicide ideation. I was deeply depressed. I was unable to go to work. It actually had culminated. So I was what happens is we get cues from the universe, which is our body as well. And so we get these constant signals that come through to us that you need to adapt or change. And so suffering and pain are mechanisms designed by the universe to guide us. And if we ignore those messages and those signals, then it will only get louder. That's all. It doesn't go away and you win. It just means it gets louder. So I kept ignoring these signals, which was the anxiety, the insomnia, the depression, the panic attacks. But what happens is eventually if we continue to ignore signals, we get what's called a Rashi. Now in Sanskrit, a Rashi is a cataclysmic moment. That means the current trajectory becomes unsustainable. So let's just say there's a kid that keeps robbing ladies that leave the supermarket with stealing their handbags. Now, he's going to know intuitively and inherently that this is not the right thing to do. But if they keep doing that, eventually what's going to happen, that unsustainable behavior, which is not aligned with natural law, there will become a Rashi at some point where that unsustainable behavior means that you get handcuffed and you get taken to prison. And so we see this in relationships, breakdown or breakthrough. We see it in companies, breakdown or breakthrough. We see it in civilizations, breakdown or breakthrough. And so for me, my major Rashi was at the age of 29. And it was absolutely definitively a rock bottom moment because the only other option at that point was to adapt and change and evolve or to break down, which would be suicide.
What did you do in that moment, when you got to that Rashi of, I've got to go this way or that way? Did you reach out to somebody who had experience? Did you read books? Did you, what was the next step? How did you intuitively know where to go?
The first thing, the actual very specific moment was getting ready for work. And I was in my bathroom in a house that I'd built in Bondi, 500 meters from the beautiful sands of Bondi Beach and a beautiful home. And that was one of those, the smile that whereas my life was amazing, that I was crumbling on the inside. And so I collapsed that morning with a major panic attack. And I didn't know what it was. I thought I was having a heart attack. So I was curled up on in a ball on my bathroom floor in like this dread and cold sweats and vision blurred. I had a knife sharp pain in my heart. I couldn't stand up. And I got taken to a doctor, and they explained that day, I went to a doctor who explained I was having a nervous breakdown. He sent me to a psychiatrist to explain that I have a stressful disposition. He put me on medication. And at that point, I developed mental health disorder and I couldn't go to work. So at this point, I'm in rock bottom, really a complete basket case. I was pretty messed up. And I was watching Freeway TV because it was 1996 and there's no internet. There's no YouTube, no podcasts. And there was a documentary about a property developer that was using a particular style of meditation, transcendental meditation or Vedic meditation, as a tool for his success. And I was really into success. So that was a light bulb moment for me. And I believe the universe is always supporting us in some way, shape or form if we're open and adaptive to the signals that it's sending to us. I could have just ignored that and just kept doing what I was doing. But there was something that really was like this epiphany, a light bulb moment. And so at that point, I went to the Yellow Pages, that's Google for the young kids, picked up the Yellow Pages and started looking up meditation. And there I saw transcendental meditation in red. And I did a lot of research, ringing around all the different meditation centers and going to learn to meditate. And that was when things really changed in a big way for me.
Wow. So was TM or Vedic meditation your first introduction into meditation? Wow. What a beautiful place to start.
Yeah, it was very powerful. I remember walking into they won't let you just sign up. You have to go to an intro talk. And I said, no, I just want to start. I said, no, you have to come to an intro talk. And in the intro talk, my teacher was talking about how we have outcome-oriented fulfillment and self-referred fulfillment. Self-referred being a fulfillment that arises from within, independent of any circumstances or situations. Outcome fulfillment is this constant pleasure seeking that we have as individuals, constantly craving more and hoping for more experiences or hoping for more things so that we can trigger and activate a response inside of us from this external world. And it was like, that's been my life for the last 10 years. A constant craving of pleasure seeking, and that's just led to misery. And he talked about how pleasure seeking from the outside world will ultimately lead to discontent. And I was there thinking, this is exactly music to my ears. And so that was a real game changer for me.
Oh, I can just imagine it would have been almost this light bulb moment to realize. I remember I had the same experience when I realized there's nothing inherently wrong with me. I've just been playing the wrong game this whole time. You know, I thought that buying the house would give me that fulfillment. I thought that getting married would fill the hole in the soul, you know, getting the promotion, whatever it was. And each and every time I would achieve the thing, I might have a momentary bliss, and then I'm straight back to feeling devoid, empty, and needing the next thing to get that fix. That's that whole idea of, you know, nothing external will fill an internal void, but this idea that you can self-fulfill, that just absolutely blew my mind. I had no idea that that was even possible. I also used to think that spirituality and meditation, it was really inaccessible. I thought it was woo-woo, and I thought that unless you were living in a cave or, you know, in a monastery, it wouldn't work in our modern world. And yet I couldn't have been further from the truth. Can you describe for our listeners who perhaps don't know about Vedic meditation in a simplified form, what is it?
Yeah, the beautiful thing about Vedic meditation is we have a very high retention rate of meditators. That means most meditators stick with their practice day in, day out for decades, like literally decades. I'll be doing it 30 years every day. Most of my students will continue on doing that practice. And the reason being is that we make meditation easy with this because you get a mantra. And the mantra is like a primordial vibration that you repeat inside your head that has this resonance to it that soothes and calms the mind deeper and deeper and deeper into eventually what's called transcendence. So this is a really important component to Vedic meditation versus most other forms of meditation, is that you will transcend the thoughts in your head, the feelings in your body, and even the physical identity that you identify yourself as the body. And you go into this spacious realm, we call it the field of formlessness, where it's like an unbounded field beyond form into what's called the fourth state, the state beyond deep sleep, dreaming, and thinking state. So the mantra makes it so accessible and easy. And so you can go into a boardroom after being on a trading room floor, close your eyes, repeat your mantra, drop into a deep state within 5 or 10 minutes. 15, 20 minutes, and then come out and go back to work again. So for peak performance, and for integration of the everyday life we have here in this, I wouldn't even say Western world, this normal world these days, it's so accessible to replenish and heal yourself very quickly.
And traditionally, it's twice a day, 20 minutes per sit, isn't it?
Yeah, look, for optimal benefits, we do recommend that sort of structure, and people like that. That's the structure. Some people don't like the structure and they kind of would rather something a little bit more fluid, but we do suggest one in the morning, one in the afternoon to get that deep benefit. And the reason what we're doing is we're simply offsetting on a ratio stress to rest. And so we have huge amounts of stress being absorbed on a daily basis into our body. We call this the allostatic load, which is the wear and tear on your mind and body through your daily interactions. And that allostatic load is much, much higher now than it was 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, because by the time we even get to work at, say, 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, we've already been through a huge amount of processing information through our phones. Just look at a train station at 7 in the morning. And then throughout the day, we're not only doing our work, but we're also, responding to our friends in Snapchat or Instagram, and we're also checking on news feeds and World Cup soccer results. And even in our breaks now, when I talk to HR managers, I ask what their staff are doing in their breaks, and they're like, they're going to get a coffee. I said, what are they doing while they're waiting for their coffee to be made or drinking their coffee? And she said, well, they're going to be on their phones. I said, of course they are. So they're not really taking a break. And we're just finding that allostatic load is just so big. And so we really need to offset that stress to rest ratio. And that's where we think about the mechanics of our day and the accumulation of stress. And how do we offset that with those 20 minutes of morning and afternoon meditation?
It's so important, isn't it? We do not get that time throughout the day. I'm really big on not touching my phone for the first hour of the day because, to your point, the minute you pick up your phone, you're assaulted with the external world, and it just penetrates so deeply. And I think it's so important to be able to do your meditation practice and have that almost like a white light energy around yourself before you then step into the world, because then you get to choose how you show up in that world. Rather than being reactive, you can be responsive. I often think of it as though without my meditation practice in the morning, I'm like a piece of clothing in the tumble dryer throughout the day, just getting thrown around, But with that stillness, I can really settle into my body, settle my mind, and then I'm able to handle life with a lot more ease and grace throughout the day. It doesn't mean that things won't still cause me to become dysregulated, but I'm able to find that regulation with a lot more ease and come back to myself without this having to get really, really bad first. That like you were saying, that external feedback of the pain point. I don't have to get that far now to go, oh, I'm just going to adjust here and come back to some sort of homeostasis.
Yeah, big shift I'm trying to help the world appreciate and see is that there's that natural social conditioning in us that if you've had a tough day, you grab a glass of wine or you crack a beer. But what we're finding is that the ability for that wine or beer to clear that allostatic load isn't actually there. And in fact, what's actually happening is, ironically, is that beer or wine, particularly usually because of the environment that we're drinking the beer or wine, which is normally in a busy bar or, somewhere that is, and even if it's going home, either way, it doesn't have the capacity at all to clear the allostatic load. It has the capacity to numb you from the sensations that the allostatic load is having on you, but it doesn't actually clear it. So it's there, and what happens is it compounds. And so you haven't cleared the allostatic load. You'll release a little bit of it in sleep, obviously. That's what sleep's there for, to clear the allostatic load. But what happens is you haven't released enough. And then the compound of the allostatic load, and this is why people end up becoming alcoholics or, addicted, because we're just in this sort of just trying to keep up and catch up, and we're just compounding things along the way, and it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, that reminds me. And also, I mean, physiologically, the inflammation that you're causing your body by putting alcohol in it to de-stress is actually having the complete opposite effect. I know for me, meditation was one of the practices that I was grasping at while I was still very much in my addiction. And I would wake up with a hangover and I would try and sit for 10 minutes doing some sort of guided meditation to try and counterbalance, what I'd done to my body the night before. And, I now understand that was never going to work because of just what I was doing and how much I was drinking, and then the lack of sleep or the disrupted sleep, and then trying to meditate was really ineffective. But I know that it was probably better than nothing. But then once I got sober, Tom, the depth of my meditation, the clarity of my meditation, the layers that fell away when I was in meditation, it was just like, it was supercharged. It was like nothing I had ever experienced before. Can you help people understand why that might be?
When you think about what happens when we drink alcohol, if you drink 3 glasses of wine or 3 cans of beer, technically and legally, you're not allowed to drive a car. And the big question is, why is that? It's because the frontal lobe of your brain has become impaired. Your ability to make decisions, to have discerning capabilities, to respond quickly, to think intuitively and adaptively has been completely impaired. We call this intoxicated. You have toxified your body and your brain to the point where it doesn't actually function as it should on a normal basis. Now, not only is it not functioning as it should on a normal basis, it's actually functioning a lot less and a lot worse than on a normal basis. When we meditate, that frontal lobe actually expands. And that's why we see people with, their third eye and, all those sorts of things we talk about with the expansion of your mind. And physically, it is actually expanding because it's a muscle. We know technically that there's an expansion of the muscle when we meditate, but there's an opening as well in that frontal lobe of the brain. And we talk a lot about this with the pineal gland. And so the brain capabilities actually become more enhanced than normal, not less enhanced like with alcohol. So instead of going backwards with alcohol from standing point, we actually go forwards with meditation, where we actually increase our brain's potential. But that also, because we're not having that deterioration of the alcohol in our physiology and the increase in the allostatic load, because that compounding regular meditation, we're decreasing and clearing that allostatic load, which means the more we do that, the deeper and the better we go with our experiences.
And how do you feel your relationship with your ego has changed over your course of meditation? How long has it been now for you? Sitting 30 years, did you say, of daily
30
meditation?
years, yeah.
Wow. I'm curious to know, and this kind of ties back into, I'd love to understand more about when was the moment you realized it was time to leave the trading floor and actually step into this space full time and to share as a teacher?
2 parts there. We'll start with the ego part. What is one of the beautiful things about Vedic meditation or transcendental meditation is that you transcend all aspects of ego. That's thoughts, feelings, and physical body. That's how we identify ourselves as an individual, separate identity. Because I have thoughts, I have feelings, and I have a physical apparatus that you look in the mirror and that's who I am. And when we transcend into Turiya, the fourth state, we go beyond those 3 layers of denseness and form into formlessness, and we become just consciousness itself, an unpersonified state of awareness. And what happens with this regular, consistent meditation, particularly if we're doing retreats, we start to stabilize that conscious awareness that is now witnessing thoughts, feelings, and physicality. We start to be able to discriminate and almost like Velcro apart this idea that I have this, but ultimately I'm this. And this is a non-personified, non-changing witnessing that is going on of this. Now, it doesn't mean I don't have this. I still have an ego. And trust me, anyone see me running late for a plane, one of my students said, I saw you running at the airport. I was like, yeah, dude, I was running late. And I needed to catch that plane. It's like, oh, I thought you won this. Like, yeah, no, I had a body. I got to get on the plane, dude. And so we had a bit of a laugh about it. But the beautiful thing is that the interweaving of those 2 worlds is really, really important. Yes, I have this and I have this as well. And what's missing for most of the human experience is that part of them, which is, if you wanted to give it some words in English to try to describe it, you would say infinite love, unconditional love. You'd say joyful bliss. You'd say inner peace, which is not inner peace in my mind and inner peace in my feelings. It's inner peace in the quality of me, which is the same quality as you and everyone else, which is presence or being, which doesn't have any fluctuations or undulations. So this is something that starts to stabilize inherently whilst we have the undulations in your thoughts, feelings, and physicality. So that's the thing where I'm starting to acknowledge that I have ego, but I'm not the ego. And that's an important step in the human experience. When did I decide that it was time for me to leave finance? I see that we have 3 stages in our life, ultimately. Not as far as, first act, second act, third act, as far as our age categories that we go through in life. What I'm talking about here is our journey from seeker to finder to sharer. So let me explain that. Through our lives, when we come out of the womb, we're seeking, looking for the dummy, looking for the boob, looking for the rattle, looking for the toy. And as we get older, we're looking for the girl, we're looking for the boy, we're looking for good grades, we're looking for a uni degree, we're looking for the Coke, we're looking for the Aperol Spritz, we're looking for the bottle of wine, we're looking for a house, we're looking for a superannuation fund. We're constantly seeking outside of ourselves for something that will make us feel better. And we go through our entire lives, most of us, in that external seeking. But when we eventually reach an exhaustion in that point and we start looking inward and we seek inward rather than outward, then we start becoming what we call a finder. It's like, wow, I've discovered something that I need to share with the world. So we go from seeker. By default, eventually, just if you walk into a dark room and you're fumbling around, eventually you will find the light switch if you keep looking. And that's what happens to a lot of us, like yourself and myself. And as a seeker, you eventually become the finder. I found something really quite profound here. And for most of us, there's a natural inclination to move into sharer. And that is where we go, I need to let the world know about this. And we can, if we don't regulate that and do it in a pleasant and appropriate way, we become very annoying, like the people on the soapbox in the town square telling you, you all need to meditate. And I know I did that the bad way for quite some time. So, it's about finding that balance and that integrity and conservativeness in how we go about the sharing. But that's when we start going into structured formality. So I was initially sharing inappropriately at work functions and family dinners and hanging out with my mates. Oh my God, here comes Tom talking about meditation again. Just let's run a mile. But eventually it was time to create a more formalized structure where people could come into my containers and learn meditation with me in an exchange, a retreat, a keynote, a coaching program, a workshop. So that's when we get a formalized structured sharing. And that's when I decided it was time to leave finance and do what I do.
And talk to me about that inner, perhaps, battle or dialogue that you had about, finally releasing yourself from those golden handcuffs. Because I imagine that, as we were talking about identities, there would have been an identity with the financier and the money and the house and all those things that it brings. What was that process of letting that go?
It wasn't as much. It was a little bit challenging, obviously, with the identity side of things, because, for 26 years, you get very deeply conditioned that you're a broker and that's your label that you wear. And going from broker to meditation teacher, it's a big shift. But the biggest challenge really was financially. I had a family of 4. We had a big mortgage, had a big income, and trying to find a way to make that sustainably, economically work. And look, I did leap in with a big project, which was that film, which we can segue to in a moment. And that was where we raised capital from investors and we put a lot of money into that. And that was going to be a very, very successful project. That's how we raised the capital. It's why we invested in it, because by all accounts, the numbers stacked up. It would look like this was going to be my ticket to freedom, where I can leave finance, do this amazing project, teach a little bit of meditation on the side, but we'll be so financially supported as a result of that project that, it'll be cruisy and a beautiful walk in the park. Of course, the universe very rarely gives us what we're thinking sometimes, and it didn't end up that way. And unfortunately, what happened was, it was a very challenging time because the goalposts have moved in the film industry, and we went from people renting and paying for films to then having streaming platforms at home. And firstly, people stopped paying for films because they all had them on streaming platform subscriptions. And secondly, streamers stopped buying documentaries because they started making their own. And so it was a bit of a double whammy, and that film didn't end up eventuating financially how we had anticipated. So then I had to start building out a whole new, going back to the drawing board and building out a business model that was sustainable.
I can only imagine how perhaps stressful that time might have been. And I'm curious to know, did any of your previous mental health experiences resurface throughout that stressful period?
Yeah, it was definitely stressful. The beautiful thing is when you have a tool like something like Vedic meditation, it doesn't, like you said really wisely before on this podcast, that it doesn't stop life being difficult, and it doesn't stop you at times responding to those difficulties with an emotional fluctuation. So there was definitely times that were really challenging. There would be times when I'd be curled up in a ball, rocking backwards and forwards at 2 a.m. going, what the heck am I doing? But you have this great adaptive capacity with your tools and techniques to recover very quickly and not lean on the old patterns and old habits that you might have leaned on to numb you through those times. I remember at one point we were really in a difficult position with the film. Things were just not working out. Things were in probably the darkest and bleakest point. And I knew that the solution to that problem was somewhere in the field of all possibility. And I had to spend more time in the field, which meant more time meditating. So rather than pushing harder to try and work my way through that, I spent more time meditating, and I had these downloads during one meditation, and that really was something that helped us sort of pivot and change and find a way out of that problems. So this is where I do a lot of corporate work with organizations. And I say to them, if your staff are trying to solve problems from a stressed mindset, you're going to have an impaired brain that is limited, just like someone that's been drinking alcohol. That frontal lobe shuts down when we're in stress response because we're going to operate from the primal part of the brain, which is fight or flee. And you don't have a very creative, adaptive, intuitive mind operating in their software, in their brain, because they're operating in stress. So if you want your staff to be more creative, more productive, more efficient, then you need to have better stress management tools in your company.
Oh my goodness. I'd never thought of it like that, but it's so true, isn't it? I mean, I'd always understood that creating space for teams to practice mindfulness would improve creativity, but I didn't really piece together that part of, well, of course they're reacting from the reptilian brain, and it is very black and white, and there isn't that space for ideas and expansion. It's such a good point that you make. Coming back to the film for a moment, Tom, I just felt so much heart when I was watching that, and it felt to me like you've been put on this earth for a deep purpose. What was the mission and the inspiration behind creating the film? And, I can see, and even as we've spoken here today, that you're here to change the world. So tell me more about that.
When I learned this meditation, within days and weeks, I was like, what the heck? Why is the world, this has been around for 5,000 years. Why is not everyone doing it? Why is it not in prisons? Why is it not in hospitals? Why is not every school doing it? Why is not every organization doing it? Why is not every person doing this? We all brush our teeth every day. Why is not everyone meditating every day? And so admittedly, I became a bit evangelical and a bit annoying about my passion for what had happened, because I couldn't believe how quickly it changed my life, like so quickly. And on every level, from physiological, emotional, mental, spiritual, of course. And so I started to, with some consultants in the marketing and branding field, create what's called the Stillness Project. And with that, the inspiration was to inspire 1 billion people to meditate daily. I knew that people's lives and people become better when they start meditating. They don't become perfect, and not all your businesses are going to go well, and your mum and dad are still going to get sick or pass away. Like, all those things are still going to happen. But what I knew definitively was that we simply become better humans, and we become better at being human. That is, dealing with daily challenges. We don't become perfect. I'm still trying to work life out as complex, right? But we definitely become better. We become more intuitive, we become more conscious, we become more adaptive. And so I knew that if I wanted to solve most of the world's problems, I need to have more conscious humans on the planet who are capable of solving those problems more creatively. And so I just felt like the best thing I can do for the planet is to bring meditation to the world. And to do that, I needed to have exposure. And I thought one of the best things I could do, because The Secret took a very esoteric subject matter, the law of attraction, and make it a household phenomenon with their film and book. So I just thought, all I've got to do is follow The Secret's pathway. And we even got the director of The Secret to be the director of our film. And so unfortunately, it didn't end up being that way, but that was the inspiration behind the film.
But people can still access the film. I just want to mention that. Hey, so if people do want to check out the film, where should they go, Tom?
They can watch it on my website, entertheportal.com. So the film is still available for free there. We're just at the moment gifting it to the world, and people can watch it in their own time on that website.
Definitely something that I'd recommend everybody to watch, because it is just such a beautiful piece of work. Like the film itself, I mean, the message behind it is so important, but it was also just a great, enjoyable film to watch as well. Now, Tom, for me, when I was doing my yoga teacher training and I was starting to understand the 8 limbs of yoga and really getting this clear picture that all of the asana and everything, the pranayama and everything that we do is essentially leading the body to meditation. That's the sort of the peak state that we're looking to get to. I'd love to know more about your own experience with, you're obviously well educated with Sanskrit and this whole Eastern world. Tell me more about the other practices that you've led into to sort of create the practice that you have today.
Yeah, look, I use, and I always believe and teach that we can't have a one-stop shop, fix it for everything, whether it's breath work or qigong or yoga or meditation. I believe we have to take a very holistic approach to our transformational process. And for me, firstly, on our retreats, we use a 4-limb sequence that integrates 10 yoga asanas and that takes about 20 minutes. And then we add on to that some pranayama, alternate breathing. Then we add on to that Vedic meditation, and then we add on to that shavasana. And that combination, when we compound that through a consistent recurring pattern, we see phenomenal transformation happening in people's lives. And we help facilitate that with some workshops and some talks and some other things that happen on the retreat, with some breath work and some cacao ceremony and waterfall ceremonies and all sorts of stuff. But on a day-to-day basis, I really feel that there is a number of different factors that we need to integrate on a daily basis for overall peak performance and the optimization of the human experience. The way I see it is this: we need to strength train. So for me, particularly as we get older, we need to do some heavy weights to develop muscle tissue, and also for that, develop bone density. On top of the weights, we need to have cardio. So we need to get that blood moving through our body and get a sweat up, 3 or 4 times a week. On top of that, we need to stretch now, because if we're doing strengthening, we need to stretch as well, so that we're lithe and supple as we get older, particularly. So I do stretching every day. We need to, for me, I like hot and cold therapy, so contrast therapy. So I do saunas and ice baths. I really love that combination of those two. Not too much, because we don't want to dehydrate, but finding that balance of hot and cold therapy I find is really important. We need to upgrade our minds. So that's obviously constantly reading, getting mentoring, having podcasts in our life like this, something that is continually upgrading the code in our brain, the vasanas. And then breath work, I think, is a really powerful tool. So I do a lot of breath work, which is just that pure oxygenation of the body is so powerful. And then the other final thing is, lots of time in nature and lots of time in beautiful relationships and connection. Not just with family, but friends and clients, colleagues, just the community as a whole. And I think having a caboodle really helps as well.
Absolutely. Any sort of fur baby is going to help with that. What about service, Tom? Like, I know for me, I'm part of a 12-step community, and a big part of that is service and giving back and giving your time. And I just know how much it's changed me as a person, and I've seen the impact it's had on so many of the people I love. So what's your lens on service and how it changes us energetically, spiritually, all of it?
Yeah, I always come back to Anthony Robbins' 6 human needs, and one of those 6 human needs, and they can Google that if they want to find out more about it, but one of them is contribution. And I really feel that contribution is such an important part of life. The funny thing, not funny, but interesting thing, when I was as a broker, still hadn't become a teacher, but I just felt this inherent pull to contribute in a way. And that's because I just increased my capacity to give more. And this is something that we find happen with people as they go from that seeker, finder, sharer. I just wanted to start sharing some of what I found. And it wasn't necessarily teaching meditation. It was just sharing some of my heart. And so the first thing I started to do was I used to buy tube stock from, which is little tiny trees. I love gum trees. And I started planting them all around. The streets was a bit naughty, but I was calling myself a guerrilla gardener, and I had a whole team of people that I built around me that were working with supporting these trees that we planted. And I walk around Bondi and I see these massive gum trees now.
Oh, wow.
In these beautiful locations that are part of the contribution to clearing the air with oxygen and taking out carbon dioxide, and birds flying them, and there's swings built on them now. It's really beautiful. But then I went from there with greater capacity than just growing trees. So then I went and worked in a soup kitchen. So I was working at Wayside Chapel up in King's Cross. So every Saturday morning, I worked there for nearly 2 years.
Wow.
Working with the homeless. And then I knew I had more capabilities. So then I started becoming a teacher, and then started doing work with street kids and working in shelters at times, teaching meditation. And these days, my contribution is slightly different than what it used to be. So my contribution in one way is doing the work that I do, and the best use of my time is to actually do more of that work. But my contributions that I make now is through a platform called B1G1, which you'll see on my website. B1G1 is buy one, give one. So for every meditation course, every keynote, every retreat sign up, every coaching program, anything that is a transaction on through my business, then I take a percentage of each one of those transactions from gross revenue, not from profits. And I put that through B1G1. And you can see all the impacts, over 40,000 impacts we've made so far through that contribution here by changing people's lives, but contribution here by donating some of the funds from our business to those charities around the world.
Absolutely incredible, Tom. Thank you for doing that work and giving back. That is so, so important. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, it's put a total different, just on that, we talk a lot about that in my Zen Academy, which is my coaching program for conscious leaders, that, the impetus and the inspiration for my work is actually surprisingly more motivated by me getting onto the B1G1 platform and seeing those little impacts rise and seeing those people's lives changing. It's part of the most inspirational part of my work is that I love getting that each week and going in there and knowing that in some way, shape, or form, I'm seeing those impacts around the world happen.
And it just flips the whole lens, isn't it, on what we're led to believe initially, which is, the next BMW will give you that feeling. The next first class flight to Europe will give you that feeling. And then, you look at people living in parts of the world, third world countries, who have none of that, and yet they're blissfully happy. And a lot of the time it's because they live with love, compassion, and contribution to one another.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a shift that I hope we can make more of in the world.
Absolutely. So, Tom, we've spoken about how you overcame the anxiety, the depression, the panic attacks, and the drug and alcohol abuse. But I want to know, what did that actually teach you? What are the lessons you took from all of that?
The one thing that I always take away is this, and I work with a lot of people in this space, is that we're all just seeking. And we're just either seeking in pathways that are more sustainable and more effective, or pathways that aren't as sustainable and aren't as effective. But either way, we're all just seeking fulfillment. And we can go this way, we can go this way, we can go this way, we can go this way. And that whatever one is choosing, that's okay. I'm not here to scoff or scold or condemn anyone for whatever pathway they're choosing. For me, I had people telling me 5 years before I had my mental breakdown that I need to stop doing what I'm doing and I should try some other alternatives. I'm like, it was just me putting fingers in ears and not listening. And I just wasn't ready. I hadn't completed or exhausted that research into where I think I could find fulfillment. And I've got people in my family, people in my friendship that are still on those pathways. And I'm cool with that. Like, I'm not here to say, don't do that. That's wrong. You shouldn't be doing it. You should do it my way. We all have some sort of addiction to whatever pathway we're on, because we all think our pathway is the best way. And if someone wants to change their pathway and they want to talk to me about other alternatives, I'm all ears, I'm all in, I'm ready to work with them. But if they're not, then I'm not going to make them feel bad about what they're choosing and try and deny them their research, because maybe they need to go another 3 months, another 6 months, another 2 years down that pathway to exhaust that research. It's like trying to pull someone out of fourth year uni. Say, don't finish your uni degree. Come and do this thing over here. It's like, no, I've got to finish this.
Oh, it's so true, isn't it? There's a saying in recovery, attraction, not promotion. And also, like, don't get in the way of somebody's rock bottom. Like that, breakthrough or breakdown, like you were saying before, that's the moment they need to get to. And who are you to intervene or enable and stop them from reaching that? Yeah,
absolutely. It's the analogy I like to use is that if you take a arrow and put it in a bow, and if you pull that back just a little bit and then let it go, it'll kind of just and then flops. But if you pull it back and then pull it back and then pull it back and pull it back and pull it back, and if you pull it to the maximum limit and then let it go, it goes so fast and so straight that what we tend to find is those people that have pulled it back a long way, which is what I'd done. It's kind of like the string was about to snap. That my trajectory was so rapid and so quick in that healing and that all buy-in to that pathway that who was to stop me from continue pulling it back to the point where I was ready to let it go and fly like an eagle. Yeah, wow, I relate to that so much, Tom. That's beautiful. Yeah. Tom, I've got one final question for you that we ask all of our guests here on the show. I'm nervous.
That is I know I didn't prepare you for this one. Tom, what are your 3 non-negotiables that allow you to live your life today happy, authentic, and free?
Well, of course, the first one will be my meditation. The second one will be just a holistic approach to keeping my body in an optimal state. So meditation is also good for spirituality, emotions, and mind, but having a holistic approach to physical well-being, what I eat, what I drink, how I exercise, how I stretch. And then the last one is connection. I just think it's such an important part. There's many times I love just being in solitude and silence and being off on the mountain and meditating. But there's a beautiful line in a film that I love deeply, a film called Into the Wild. And it's a true story about a young gentleman that wanted to run away from his uni degree and his rich parents. And he went off into the heartlands of Alaska and found complete solitude, thinking that that's where he was going to find peace. And he went into a really dark space and ended up dying out there in the mountains. But what they found was his journal. And towards the end of the film, when they were making this film, one thing he'd wrote in bold letters in his book: happiness is best shared. And this is something that the richness of life is best to be shared with people that you love. And I think that connection is really, really important.
Tom, what a beautiful place to end this conversation today. Wow. I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to be here and to share some of your wisdom with our audience. I have no doubt they're going to want more of you. So where should they go?
Come to Instagram. I love connecting with people there. I find it's very easy to communicate. So Instagram is Tom Cronin, one word, TomCronin. And then my website, tomcronin.com. They can find me all there.
Amazing. I'll make sure I link all of that in the episode show notes. We say here on Behind the Smile that when we recover loudly, no one need suffer in silence. So thank you so much for all that you do, Tom.
Well, thanks for creating this space, for inviting me to have this conversation. And without you holding this space, then I wouldn't have had the conversation. So people wouldn't be able to hear it. So big honor and gratitude to you as well. So it's been really lovely to share space with you.
Likewise. You take care and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.